Welcome to Unshakable with Lovell Casiero. We are so glad you are here today, and I am excited to introduce you to our next guest. Stacey Brown is an author and minister in Jacksonville. Her and her husband pastor a church in Jacksonville. You'll hear about that. But she has quite the testimony. And she actually wrote a book called From Broken to Blessed. And so I'm just going to use the about the author section to have you understand who you will be meeting today when you meet Minister Brown. It says, Stacey Brown is a woman of faith whose life reflects obedience, resilience, and trust in God's divine direction. Through seasons of loss, leadership, and renewal, she has learned firsthand how God restores broken places for his purpose. A devoted wife, mother, healthcare leader, and lifelong learner pursuing advanced education, Stacey writes to encourage others walking through healing and surrender, reminding them that no season is wasted in God's faithful hands. That sounds like the blueprint for an unshakable guest. And I look forward to having you meet my new friend, Minister Stacey Brown. We'll be right back and we'll get started.
I see hate through the pain. I see light in the rain. Dreams of brighter days. Tell me what you're thinking. I have hope in my spirit, flames of love in my heart. Baby, let me tell you something, I'm about to dance. You realized you're not in control. Once again, tell you once again. Hallelujah, I'm on my way to be the best version of me. Mama knows how to wake you up to dance. Mama knows you're not a mama knows how to wake you up to dance. Mama knows how to wake you up to dance. Mama knows you're not a mama knows how to wake you up to dance.
Welcome back to Unshakable with Lovell Casiero, and I am delighted to welcome Stacey Brown to the studio today. Stacey, so glad to have you on the podcast.
Thank you so much. I am so happy to be here to share my story and just enjoy having a conversation with you, Lovell.
Stacey, we could be sisters from another mister. I have just finished your book, From Broken to Blessed. We're going to make sure that the audience knows how to get a copy of that. And I'm telling you, there are times in my life where I know that God finds ways to minister to me. And this book could not have been more spot on for the journey that I am going through. The places you have been, I share some similarities. And we recently met at a conference with C-Suite for Christ. And I was speaking there, and you came up to me with tears in your eyes afterwards. And we just, when spirit meets spirit, right?
Yes,
when spirit
exactly.
meets spirit, that's
Yes.
what it's all about. So I always know the story before we jump on camera, but I wanted you to go back, as you were not always a minister. You have had a illustrious career in the medical field. That was another similarity when we talk about that I could relate to, the identity of a job, or thinking it's your identity. But I want to go back to you as a young, unprepared mother. But just before I do that, there is one little paragraph that I think sums up a lot of what we will hear today from your story. And I'm having some issues with my contacts, so I have to put my glasses on. I love this. This is actually, you all will need to get this book. It's in the acknowledgments. It says, I share this testimony not to elevate myself, but to magnify the faithfulness of God. If you are reading this while questioning your worth, your timing, and your calling, let this serve as reassurance. God is not intimidated by your past, delayed by your fear, or confused by your questions. He is patient, he is intentional, and he is committed to completing what he began. I was hooked when I read that, hooked. So tell us a little bit about your origin story.
Well, you read that and I started getting teary-eyed because it just brings back how when I first got pregnant with my daughter and how ashamed I was. You know, I wasn't married, I was pregnant, and I felt that God, you know, what I thought of being a Christian, he couldn't use me. And I remember something that my mom said to me, said to my dad, you know, you put her on a pedestal, now look at her, she's pregnant, she's not married. But the biggest thing is when I went to church and I just knew I was going to be ridiculed because, you know, I came from a Pentecostal background and, you know, you had to be a certain way. And here I am, unmarried, pregnant. But my pastor at that time, and it's in my book, he said to me, he said, this is not a mistake. This is a blessing from God. And through that journey, even though I got pregnant, same father, we didn't work out, but I kept holding on to that. This is not a mistake. This is a blessing from God. So both of my children, I'm like, okay, God, Elder Kent said, this is a blessing from you. So I need you to help me raise them. So I think I mentioned this in my book from the movie Roots, where he held up his children, his child, and he gave them back to God. And that's what I did to mine. I'm like, Lord, here they are. I don't know what I'm doing. I'm doing this by myself. I need you to guide me. And he did. Even though I made mistakes, I can't say it was God, it was me doing things my way, but my kids are grown, they're doing well, and it's just been a blessing.
You know, I was also a young mother, and when you recently heard me speak at C-Suite for Christ, you'll remember I talked about writing about the decades that built me and challenging anyone that wanted to stand up and tell what they were doing in their 20s. And we do make mistakes and we do make poor choices. And sometimes we have to pay for them, but sometimes the grace reveals something that is so precious and so special. And you are absolutely correct. And your pastor was absolutely correct that those children are such a blessing. And I never regret 1 minute. It was hard. It was very hard. And I know from reading From Broken to Blessed, it wasn't an easy journey raising 2 kids as a single mom. And I just, you know, I always say this, Stacey, when I sit down to do these podcasts, I remind myself that it is not about me as the host. It is not really about the guest either. It is more about the people that we will impact. And there's some young woman or young man out there today feeling very ashamed of choices that they've made, relationships that they've severed, mistakes they feel they made, or thinking that it might have been a mistake. But there's hope with grace, right? Like grace covered you. Grace covered me, and God can use you. And I just think your story is an amazing story. So let's go on. You ended up leaving Pennsylvania. That's another similarity, by the way. My granddaddy was a Pentecostal preacher. I lived in Pennsylvania for like 20 years. I'm telling you, like we are sisters. But you tell me about your how you found your career in the medical profession.
So while I was in Pennsylvania, I was going to college. This is prior to me getting pregnant. And my college life was partying. I wasn't trying to get an education. and I realized that I was wasting my parents' money. So a recruiter approached me for the Navy, and I joined the Navy. What I wanted to do was become work on the submarines. But during that time, women weren't allowed to be on that. And the recruiter was like, hey, how about you be a hospital corpsman? And he described what the hospital corpsman was, and I was hooked. And from there, they were like, hey, you want to be a surgical tech? We'll send you to school to be a surgical tech. Learned what that was. I'm like, oh my gosh, I get to do surgery and I get to see blood. I mean, I was just so excited. And from that, I only can think of God, because my goal was, I was going to school to be a chemical engineer. I wanted to build bombs. I wanted to blow up things. And God was like, no, that is not where I need you to be at. And so with that, it was just God guiding me. I can't even say, oh, I wanted to be in the medical field. It was him really ordering my steps. And I thank him because I was able to use that to care for my mom. All those years of experience in the medical field, it allowed me to make sure that she was cared for properly, through all her years until she transitioned. And so it was not something that I was, oh, that's my goal in life. No, it was all ordained by God. I mean, because I did not like hospitals nor doctors, but
I think I say this on every episode. If you want to make God laugh, tell him your plan. I've made him laugh so many times because I'm a planner. You're talking about your mom. There is so much discord these days in family. I have a devotional I do every morning. And part of that devotional has a community where I am able to pray for others and they can pray for me. And I read through the prayer requests after my devotion each day. There's hundreds of prayer requests there, and I try to comb through a lot of them. And I am so surprised at how often there is prayer about reconciliation in family. And I know that I'm not saying that you were in a place where you weren't in a relationship with your mom, but through your book, I know that you have had, you didn't always have a great relationship and you had some resentment. And I think, there's a message in that too, to these families that are going through this discord and this brokenness right now. So share a little bit about that, that part of your story.
I would definitely say that it took God to get me and my mother to have a relationship, because growing up, I really, as a child, thought my mom hated me because I would do something and my sister would do something and my sister would get praised for doing something and I would get ridiculed. I would get put down. And so my relationship with my father was where I built that bond. And so anytime when it came to discipline, if my father would discipline me and I would cry first, and I knew he would discipline me, I'll just get scolded, sent to my room, and I'm on punishment. But my mom was the biggest disciplinary. And anytime my father didn't discipline me the way she wanted, she would come behind and discipline me. And so we had this relationship where I think it's more like because I was so much like her that we just butted heads. And no matter what, my mom would say, it's hot outside. I'd be like, it's cold, just to irritate her. And we just grew up like that. And I remember when I finally moved out, well, the first time I tried to move out, I just left. I mean, we had this big blowout and took my kids and I just left. And I remember my grandmother was there and she told me, she said, if you don't get right with your parents, and she gave me the scripture, honor your mother and your father. And she said, you will never leave this house. You'll always have to keep coming back. And I took that for heart. And I was like, okay, so the second time I moved out, I still didn't have a good relationship with my mom, but I was obedient. Whatever she told me to do, I didn't talk back. I honored her. And when I moved out, I was gone, but I still had resentment. I still had resentment in my heart. So when I would call home, I'd only talk to my dad, and my dad would force me to talk to my mom. And I would tell him, I don't want to talk to her. I have nothing to say to her. And this is my mom. How do you say that you don't have nothing to say to your mother? And finally, I thank God for my husband. I really do. Because when we met, he had asked, he was proposing to me. And me and my mom had this hateful, it was just a hateful disagreement. And my husband looked at me and he said, I cannot marry a woman that can't get along with their mother. And that hurt. It hurts even now thinking about it. And I'm like, well, you don't know how she treats me. You're not here. And he goes, I don't care. He said, I will not marry anyone that does not respect their mother.
Wow.
And
Wow.
that hit hard. And so at that point, I'm like, okay, God, you've got to fix this, because I don't have any way of fixing it, because every time we would talk, things that she would say to me were just not very loving. So he just said, forgive her. I'm like, forgive her for what? Do you know, as you have the conversation with God, you see what she's done to me, the things that she said. He was like, I don't care. Forgive her. And the day I did that was the day that we got a relationship.
I love that throughout your book, you bring scripture in to authenticate the message that you're giving. And I got to say, it's a very quick read, but packed with wisdom. I read it this morning because I wanted it to be fresh. I'm going to read it again. I'm going to highlight some things in it, because I know there's going to be days coming that I'm going to want to refer back to your story and the wisdom that you share about the things you were going through. But, I was also a rebellious child. I like to say I put every gray hair in my mother's head. My sister was not the rebel. In fact, I think, I needed so much attention in my poor choices and the heartbreak I caused my mom that, Joy kind of stepped back and took a second row seat in the house, because I was creating so much chaos. But they love us unconditionally, and that's what we have to remember. And when you were speaking about how angry you were, and how when Hinton said you got to respect your mother, and I so much enjoyed meeting him. You can just feel his wonderful spirit when we, just shaking his hand and saying, it was nice to meet him. He has an amazing spirit. I wasn't surprised what I learned about him in the book, but I was thinking about what Jesus said on the cross. And he said, Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do. And so a lot of times in people's lives, they will allow forgiveness or the lack of forgiving. And the person that's holding the grudge, the person that can't forgive, is the only person that is getting hurt in that situation, right? So there's someone out there too that needs to hear that message, because forgiveness is hard. Forgiveness is really hard. And my grandmother was a Pentecostal preacher's wife, and she was the most wonderful preacher's wife. She traveled with him. She made sure their outfits matched and all that good stuff. Like, she was just the best preacher's wife. But she used to say, I can forgive them, but I can't forget it.
Exactly.
I love my grandmother. But so that relationship, we know, came full circle, because, as you have already referenced, your medical background, and thank you for your service, by the way. But as you have already referenced, your mother caring for you, and then came full circle, right? Came full circle. So you may make me cry when you start talking about this, but let's talk a little bit about what your mother went through with her at the end of her life.
That was probably one of the most difficult times for me, because she started out strong, and my mother ended up having a stroke. She ended up having 2 strokes. Her very first stroke, I got a phone call from my sister, because they are on their way home from Texas, headed to Florida. And in Mississippi, my sister said my mom wasn't acting right, like she couldn't talk. And my dad tried to help her out of the car, and she couldn't stand, she couldn't walk, and he ended up hurting his back. And when I got that call, I remember breaking down. You know, this is the same person that says she had resentment for her mother. And I'm like, we got to get to my mom. We got to get to my mom. And we drove from Jacksonville, Florida, straight to Mississippi, and just to see my mom. I mean, she was talking, but not clear, but she couldn't move. And my sister was sitting there, and of course, my older sister, you would think I'm older and she's the youngest, but she doesn't take things, you know, as well as I do it. Me being in the medical field, but to see a loved one in that condition is so hard. And she just declined at that moment, you know, to the point where when we finally got her back to Jacksonville, she didn't want to eat. My mom's stubborn, and she didn't want to take her medicine. She had went from 260 down to under 100 pounds, and forcing her. And the physician that I work with, he was like, give her marijuana. I'm like, I am not giving my mom pot. He was like, not the drug, the part that makes her want to eat. So we got her a prescription for that, and she started doing better. But that stroke just changed her. And when that dementia started coming in, like I said, my mother wasn't a very nice person, but when dementia hit her, she got a lot worse. But the only person that could deal with it, because I had forgiven her, so nothing she said to me hurt me anymore. And so she would say her things, and I'm like, I don't care. I'm going to still do what I'm supposed to do, and I'm still going to take care of you. And we would go back and forth and everything. And at some point, it got to the point where my father couldn't help take care of her, and they had to move in with us. And that right there probably is the most joyous moment that I had with my mom, having her here. I'm sorry.
Yeah. Crying is always allowed on Unshakable.
But her last year and a half, she was with me. The daughter that nobody thought she cared about, the daughter that everybody thought my sister was going to be the one to take care of her because they had such a good relationship. But it was me. And my husband and I, we bought a house to make them comfortable. We gave them their space. God made it so that I was 15 minutes away. So if they needed me, I was here. So it was such a blessing that I was able to spend so much time with her, love on her, take care of her, and show her that despite
It's okay.
Despite everything that happened in the past, it didn't matter. You're my mom. And when she moved in, it was a year and 2 months. And then she was gone, that she moved in. But I had her for a year and 2 months. I mean, I always had her, but taking care of her, being there with her, making sure she's okay, it did something that makes me feel good.
Yeah, when God heals something, he does it. He doesn't do it halfway. He doesn't do it. And he healed that relationship. And so even though people might have thought your sister would be the one to take care of her, I think, God was using the brokenness in your relationship with your mom to make you the best caregiver she could have had. And then on top of that, you had a strong Christian man standing beside you, helping you and supporting you. And my husband took care, it was his mother's caregiver for about 6 years. Now, she didn't have cognitive issues. She had other medical issues, and she was in a skilled nursing facility. But I watched that man she didn't like the food. So he would take her 3 meals a day. She could tolerate breakfast, but she would, and the day she passed, she was still calling her shots and making decisions on her own. She was almost 101 years old. But I didn't take care of my mother-in-law, but I supported him to take care of her. And that means a lot. That if you know that means a lot. So when I was reading that part of your story, I'm thinking, oh, I know how important it was that your husband stepped up as well and supported you to support her. Beautiful story. I got chill bumps just thinking about it.
My husband, he was the main one saying, we're going to have to move them in with us. And I'm like, you're initiating this. Okay. Then I know that you are in favor of it, so.
And there's the saying, there's no house big enough for two families. And so it can get interesting, right? It can get interesting. So it wasn't long after the loss of your parents, you had another big loss in your life. And that one almost, in every unshakable story, there is the time of being shaken to the point that you think it's going to take you down. And in speaking to you and learning about your story and also reading about this part, I know that this was probably the hardest thing you went through. And that was the loss of your brother. Sudden, not expected, right?
So we both had heart problems. And, he was, again, stubborn, not doing what he's supposed to do. But later on, you've got to, Lonnie, you've got to take care of yourself, because he was my best friend. Like growing up, I was at his heels. No matter what it was, what he did, I was right behind him. And when I got that call, it was like my world broke, because I didn't care what time or what situation my brother would call me. I could be mad at him and he will call me and just say, I love you, sis. And that would just take everything away. And when I got that call, you're trying to be strong because now I'm a manager and they can't see weakness. I got to have strength because I got to support my team. And when his girlfriend called me, I was in the department and I tried my best to get from the department into my office. And I couldn't. I just started crying out and I was like, God, why? God, why? God, why? And I was and my supervisors, one of my team members, they came out me and got me into my office. And you never know how people really care about you until you're broken. That's when you really see the care and the sincere care. And they took such good care of me because, now I already had to share 2 years prior about my mom passing. Everybody was prepared for that. They knew about it. But here, and then I'm like, how am I going to tell my dad? How am I going to tell my dad? He just lost his wife. Now he's lost his oldest son. How am I going to break that to him? And not only that, how am I going to tell the rest of my family what happened? Because everybody's looking to me now. I'm the matriarch, as my cousin said, of the family. So I got to spread the news, but I'm not strong enough. I'm not capable of doing this. I can't. I can't tell people that, especially my siblings, your brother's gone. And he just went to sleep and didn't wake up. And so, but you want to know how good God is?
I do.
My brother passed away February 28th, 2024. January, he came to my house December 28th. I got to see him for 2 weeks. It was like a week and a half, something like that. Spent time with him. He loved on my dad. He loved on us. I believe my sister was up here too. And we all were able to get together, the siblings. And it was a family affair. And I didn't realize what God was doing. We just knew we were going to see each other again, not knowing a month later in February, my brother was going to be gone. And so my dad was like, we just saw Lonnie. I'm like, yes, we just saw Lonnie. And I just started thanking God. I said, God, I thank you because he was the last one of the siblings in Pennsylvania. And he came down and we were able to be with each other, meet with each other, love on each other. And God knew this was going to take place. I didn't know. The family didn't know, but God knew. And he brought us all together and we were able to see each other before he passed. But because of my closeness to my brother, it hurt so bad. And I told my husband, you're going to have to tell Daddy. I cannot tell Daddy that he lost, and watch, because I'm so close to my father, and watch him break.
Nothing. That's news no parent wants to hear. Like you just want to make sure that the cycle of life goes like it's supposed to, and your children bury you and not you burying your children. And I recently, this past year, attended a funeral, and the saddest part of it was watching the father of the deceased, watching him, and also, like, this was the second child he had lost. And I'm saying to myself, how is he even sitting here? You can't imagine that type of brokenness and grief and all of that. But listen, you are never given more than you can bear. And I know, I know, you know that. And when I thought about our Pentecostal background, whenever you said, you were just saying, why, God, why? And my granddaddy used to say, you never question God.
No.
My granddaddy, my grandmother lost in a car accident. They lost a daughter, and my cousin Sharon, their daughter Millie, and my cousin Sharon, and it was a drunk driver hit them head on, and both of them lost their lives. And I remember as a 8-year-old little girl standing in the funeral home and saying to my grandfather, why, Granddaddy, why? And him saying to me, you never question God. But when my grandmother passed away, one of the young men that spoke at her funeral said, we were raised, because again, it was in the Pentecost church, said, we were raised to never question God. He said, I found out God's got an answer for every question I have. And so sometimes I say, like, God, I'm your child. Like, I need to understand this, when you're going through things. But listen, I want to make sure we save some time to let people know where to get your book. But I think the place where you are now is the testimony of your story. You finally ended up leaving the job that you had so much success at. Again, I can relate to how you explained having to get over that being your identity. And I went through that same thing just this year. I decided to pursue this new journey, and I left what was my whole career for more than 30 years. And I was an executive in the hospitality industry. And it's interesting how we let that define us when really our identity is in Him. And so obviously you came through that as I came through that and understood that. But let's talk about what you do today. Minister Brown, let's talk about what you do today, and going back to that young woman who thought she was too broken, too sinful, too wild in her college days for God to ever use her. Let's talk about how God's using you today, and used you in the testimony of this book to minister to me. So I want to thank you for that. But let's talk about where you and Hinton are now in your ministry.
Well, I'm a minister of Believers House of Worship, Word of God Ministry. And my husband and I are the founders. And I tell you, our ministry is about building disciples, and just talking about it and just the walk in the favor of God in this process has just been a blessing. because that was not my goal. My goal was not to be a minister. I was not to be a minister. I was probably just to be a spectator more. And I told my husband, no, I'm just going to be your support system. And God again laughed at me and said, okay, yeah. And he grew me into who I am now. And I thank God for that. I really do, because I would not be this bold if he had not opened that door and said, Stacey, walk through it. I would not be able to share, be vulnerable, and let people see that side of me, because I just like to hide that. I don't want nobody to see that. And since my walk and our building of our ministry and drawing people in, our ministry is not big. I mean, a lot of people, like, you have a small congregation, you know, you guys, as long as you guys been in there, you should have a mega church. And I'm like, no, we've met and ministered and touched so many lives. And we're not supposed to house people. We're supposed to build disciples so they can go out and preach the good news and draw people to Christ, not house them. And so my walk, and even through my book, I'm just like, my goal and what I'm doing now is to reach as many souls and let them know that, you know, use myself, my life as an example. You know, I love being a minister. I love preaching. I love teaching. I love doing what God has called me to do. And our ministry is flowing, is flourishing. And I don't know what else to say. You know,
I think, you know, what comes to mind for me is that there are people, again, I am so focused on, it's about the person who's listening. And when my dad taught me how to sit in front of a camera and do television, when I was doing television with him, he said, he trained me to that. It's not about us. It's about the people that we're helping, and you want to focus on that. And so I know that having a calling on your life is sometimes burdensome, like a burden, right? Because it's not easy. People think, I was having a discussion the other day, every disciple died a martyr's death except for one. And so you know that the sacrifice is going to be real. And I was on a call yesterday, much different call than this. It's a group I'm a member of that's in a business organization. And they had this woman speaking that created a company and spent and sold that company for $100 million. And I'm thinking to myself, like, you know, this is a waste of my time, because that is not where God is taking me right now in my journey. But Stacey, if you listen, if you pay attention, in every place that he puts you, he sends a message. And her message to me was when she said, great success comes with great sacrifice. And I thought, that's exactly how I feel, and I'm sure you feel about your calling. You have to, like Jesus did, you have to sacrifice yourself for the people that you are impacting and the people that you are helping. You have a beautiful, beautiful story. And the world and the people that you're impacting, it would be a shame if you had kept that story to yourself. So thank you for being authentic. Thank you for putting it into a format. I want you to tell the people watching this how they can get from broken to blessed, obedience, redemption, and ordered steps by Stacey E. Brown, Minister Brown. How can they get your book, Stacey?
So it will be released June 23rd at Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Books A Million. You can pre-order it now, but it's not going to be released till the 23rd. But if you would like a signed copy, you can go to my website. That is Stacey, STACEY-E-Brown-author.org. And once you go to my website, you can purchase a signed copy and I will mail it to you with a nice word of encouragement. But you can always pre-order it. And yes, you get a nice little bookmarker to go with it.
So sweet. Like, I love this. I love this. I wanted to find out where you got these because I love that. I have bookmarks too, but yours is so special. I love it. And thank you for my signed copy. I will always cherish it. And as I said, I'm going to go back through the book and I'm going to make some highlights because I have a feeling in this journey that God has me on, I'm going to need to dial back in to the wisdom. I could not believe how much wisdom was packed into, just a few chapters. I was blown away and you have been a blessing to me. I know you will be a blessing to the people who hear your story through Unshakable with Lovell Casiero. And if you are not following me on Apple Podcast or Spotify or YouTube, I would ask the people that are watching to please follow and share so that you can continue to hear these amazing, amazing stories of people that could have been shaken, broken, never recovered, but came through. There's a place in your book where you talk about the fear that you had over faith, but we know fear knocks, faith answers, no one's there. So it's just, again, it's a beautiful, beautiful book. And I can't wait for you to get a copy. We will put your website up for people to be able to get that, to reach out to you and get a signed copy. That will be so special. But before we leave, Stacey, any parting words for the listeners today?
I just want everybody to know that your brokenness, your failures, your moments that you feel alone, those are times that God can use you. And that's actually your strength. I think about Tamla Mann's song, Finished. God's not going to not finish what he has started. So if you wake up every day, you're breathing, God has a story that he wants to finish in you, and he has a purpose he wants you to align in. So just ignore your brokenness, ignore your past, and just know that God is not finished writing your story. Amen.
Amen. That is so beautiful. And with that, a great way to end our session today. I encourage you to find your story, your testimony. And my new favorite question as the host of Unshakable with Lovell Casiero is, what's your story? So if you have a story, get in contact with me. I'd love to make sure your testimony is shared as well. But until I see you again, be well, be loved, and always, always be you. God bless.
I see hate through the pain. I see light in the rain. Dreams of brighter days. Tell me what you're thinking. I have hope in my spirit, flames of love in my heart. Baby, let me tell you something. I'm about to dance. You realized you're not in control. Once again, tell you once again.